Hi, Carlton King, the former Scotland Yard Special Branch and MI6 officer and the author of Black Ops.
I was undercover for Special Branch in a jihadi organisation.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe for free.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to the Black Spy Podcast, the show which shines a light on the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations, as well as the geopolitical world which goes with that, the world which we all are affected by, about how we function, what we can and can't do in life, what opportunities we have. All of that is affected by the geopolitics of the countries we live in and the world we inhabit globally. So today's show is all about one thing. I could not do such a show. I mean, it was interesting because last week I had with me the world-renowned Andrew Lowney, historian, author, publisher, and I believe still the world's #1 literary agent. And we got on to discussing the UK as a nation. And I basically put to him, is the UK a banana republic? Or is it heading towards that? And we looked at it historically and we looked at it as it stands at present, and there were extremely worrying signs to suggest this is the case. Well, today, one day after the supposed resignation of our Prime Minister Boris Johnson, I think I'm going to dedicate, well, I know I'm going to dedicate the whole of the programme to that particular issue. To the fact that, what do I know about Boris Johnson? What is the British government's perspective of how we, the public, see the government, and in particular Boris Johnson? What has been that perspective? And I'm going to try and add on to it what is the world's perspective from what I listen to and read and see. And additionally, I'm all going to say to you my experiences with Boris Johnson, which are not great. Let's say that from the beginning onward. But I have had experience of him and therefore drew a conclusion from particularly one experience, but the others I've had didn't change my perspective on him either. So let's look at this. And because it's such a singular subject, I'm not going to have anybody on the show with me. I'm just going to give you my thoughts, and hopefully you'll stay with me and listen to those thoughts. So, without further ado, let's whiz back to when I personally spoke to Boris Johnson and knew of him. So, if you can recall back to the year 2008 and the Olympic Games in Beijing. Well, on the run-up to those games, I was in the Metropolitan Police Special Branch. It's my sister organisation, my parent organisation, if you will. I'd been in the branch after having joined the police service, the Metropolitan Police Service. Obviously, I did some work for the American before that, joined the Metropolitan Police Service. I had basically spent 2 years in uniform, which you have to do in order to specialise from there onward, but it's highly abnormal that you do specialise after 2 years. But I always knew that what I wanted to do was to join the Metropolitan Police Special Branch. And indeed, if you want some more detail on this, you can read my book, which is available everywhere, but definitely online. Just type in Carlton King and it'll come up. But the name of the book is Black Ops, The Incredible True Story of a British Secret Agent. So if you want to read more about my history and understand where I'm coming from, you can read that. But, okay, so I'd been in the branch after 2 years, did many, many things within the branch over the following years, then was seconded for several years, to the Secret Intelligence Service, which you will know better as MI6, where I was a case officer. So what that meant is that I did, for want of a better description, the James Bond role. I went out and tried to destroy organisations or to basically obtain agents. And an agent to us is a person whom we recruit to the organisation as an outsider. So that is to say, somebody who knows what we want to know about. So, for example, it could be a person in another country who is in the other country's military or in the other country's intelligence service, and we want their secrets. So we basically recruit them as a double agent for us, or it could be a person in a terrorist organisation, which is what I was working on, terrorism, and we recruit that terrorist to be on our side so we can get the information that they have to prevent acts of terrorism. So things like that. So it's highly dangerous, highly specialised role, and I'm doing this globally around the world, picking up on organisations that are a threat to the United Kingdom. So that's what I was doing there. Then I came back to Special Branch, and I then headed up a thing called the NPOIU. I headed up the Strategic Analysis Unit within that, which looked at how we functioned and what we did as a body, as a unit in terms of our nation and what would affect us in, say, the next 3 to 5 years. So, in a sense, we were kind of crystal balling, but based on extremely good intelligence, extremely good knowledge, extremely good connections with academia, extremely good connections with politicians. I tell you this because at that stage, obviously, we're getting to the region when Boris Johnson is in County Hall in London, so he's actually the mayor of London, and our papers would have gone to him as they did to the Prime Minister, etc., etc. Subsequently, then after that, I was back in to another section of the branch where I'd been previously. That was on protection, and I helped form a new body because stupidly the Met disbanded Special Branch in 2006, an organisation that was the forerunner to MI5 and MI6. So before there was a security service, before there was a secret intelligence service, there was the Special Branch, and that organisation is what worked with those other organisations, particularly the security service MI5, to keep the United Kingdom safe. Anyway, they disbanded it, and one of the parts of Special Branch, where I just happened to be when it was disbanded, was protection, and that is the body that protects the most powerful politicians in the United Kingdom, so the Prime Minister, Foreign Secretary, Home Secretary, etc. So Boris Johnson did not get protection because he's one of the most powerful politicians, and people, frankly, who visited the United Kingdom, who were either heads of state, heads of government in their countries, so the presidents of the United States, presidents of Russia, presidents of chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, etc., etc., Chancellor of Germany. So when they came to Britain, they got our protection. So I was running this unit, which now had to become a new unit, because it used to be a section of Special Branch called A Squad, now had to become a new unit, which we then called SO1 Specialist Protection. So in the run-up to the Olympic Games, what happened was that I was asked to, as a senior member, one of the formers of this, I was asked to make sure that the Olympic Games in Hong Kong, which were they going to do the equestrian results, that the security for that Hong Kong part was safe and secure. The reason for that being was that the Queen's niece was going to be one of our Olympic athletes, and so therefore the Queen was going to turn up. Our Prince Charles was going to turn up, and various other royals. So obviously they had to be secured. So it was a sense of securing their areas and making sure that they would be looked after, as well as the Prime Minister, Foreign Secretary, etc., who would turn up because the Queen was going to come. Right. Now, what happened is that some several weeks before the game started, the Queen's nephew's horse was injured and I believe had to be put down. So therefore, the Queen wouldn't be travelling. And hence, what they asked me to do was to move from Hong Kong to Beijing and set up the Beijing operation. So where all the games were taking place, the running, cycling, the this and that, the other. So, and that's where then the preponderance of British politicians, and if the royals turn up, royals would then actually go to. And so therefore, I was asked, could I secure our facility there? Now, we created a facility called London House because we were going to be the next people who ran the games. It was going to be very, very popular. People would turn up. Now, I'm not telling you anything secretive here, but it was known that there had been a communique that said that the Uyghurs, who are a minority in China, that they were and are a Muslim minority which have been fighting the Chinese basically to create a Muslim state in that part of China, that they were wishing to attack the British in some way, shape or means because of our actions in Afghanistan. And Uyghurs have been fighting in Afghanistan. Some of the Uyghur extremists, terrorists, whatever you want to call them, insurgents, have been fighting with various Afghan groups, not solely the Taliban, but also the terroristic groups, who wished to basically chase the West out of Afghanistan. So one of the ways they wanted to get back was to attack us in Beijing. So I was sent out to make sure that our area was secure and obviously to liaise with the Chinese in order to prevent this happening. So the reason I mentioned you all of that is because when I turned up to the facility some several weeks only before the Olympics were to take place, I realised that our facility at London House, which was situated in a fantastic area, absolutely brilliant, on a lake that is very, very popular with Beijingers during the weekends. So we knew there'd be a lot of foot flow to that, but it was absolutely and totally unsecured. So I had to go about securing that facility from obvious modes of attack. So VBID, that's vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices, from people running into the facility, from maybe snipers attacking the facility when our people were in there. So I was working to achieve this. Now, looking at it, I realised that in order to make it secure from vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices, or truck bomb, etc., which would blow the whole thing up, I'd have to build a massive wall around the facility, the construction around the facility. So I went to the Chinese and spoke with them. They were insistent that there wasn't a problem with the Uyghurs, because the Chinese didn't want to be perceived as having problems with their own people. After all, the Uyghurs are Chinese, just not Han Chinese. And so they were saying, no, there is no problem, and anyway, we'll just put loads of police around it. I kind of explained that, it's not just the people that you need there. That won't stop a vehicle. If a lorry is driving towards it, we'll take care of that, it will never happen, blah, 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 blah. But, I just couldn't deal with that. I had to do something better than that. So I wrote up a plan, put it on CAD, designed it, and then basically it was going to be a wall around the facility. If you will, it would be like blockers that you presently see if you go down into London now and you see around the House of Commons. I was going to have those built. So I had to find out where I could get them built in China, and then find out the cost, obviously, who could do it within the time frames, which were very, very short. And I came on to the point that we could use railway sleepers, plus also a thing that was like Hesco Bastion, which anybody who's served in Iraq knows exactly, or Afghanistan knows exactly, which I had done, knows exactly what Hexagon Bastion is. It's basically sand, bricks, and it's more complex than that, but I'm obviously not giving that away. And it's how it will take the blast, and it takes the blast in it rather than in the facility. So I wanted to create this without, without us doing it, in a sense, going to the Chinese and asking them to do it, and obviously having to pay for it. So the way things worked was, because the Olympic Games, yes, was in the United Kingdom to come in 4 years' time, but you need to understand that it comes from the city. It was a London perspective. So the money to build this had to come from London. Hence, having to speak to the mayor. So I'm in Beijing, and the mayor was going to come to Beijing because he had to and wished to do a lot of things that would connect Beijing with London for the future games, and therefore he was coming anyway. So the London Development Fund, I had to try and raid their coffers to the tune of maybe about £500,000 in order to achieve this. So clearly with that type of money, I had to speak to the man himself, Boris Johnson. So this is what I then said I would do. So Boris then came, and I sat down with him and explained why I needed a large sum of money in order to build things around this facility, in order to make it safe for the prime ministers whom I knew were coming to see it, and potentially the royals, etc. When I say prime ministers, I should say the prime minister and ex-prime minister, because Tony Blair had already said he was coming, and he'd just left office, and Gordon Brown was going to come. He was then our serving prime minister. So I knew this, and clearly we have to keep them safe. And then a whole plethora of other more junior secretaries of states and ministers were going to attend. And, of course, foreign dignitaries would come to that facility as well, because that's where we would be, our politicians would be smoozing the foreign politicians to say, when you come to London, it will be great, it will be better than Beijing, etc., etc. And obviously Boris himself was to come to the facility. So we sat down, and I explained this to him, and I explained what I wished to do, and I explained that I had received a quote and how it would work. And he said to me, well, who are you? So I said, I am a detective inspector in SO1 Specialist Protection, previously Metropolitan Police Special Branch, where I spent all my career, and formerly I spent several years in the Secret Intelligence Service, MI6. So this is why I've been sent, because I know the intelligence aspect of it, I know the security aspect of it, and I know the national security perspective from all the agencies that I've worked in. So I'd obtained knowledge. I know what had been said by various groups who may want to attack UK senior politicians and people of import and destroy our future operations for London in terms of, blowing up the problem, and at the same time, obviously, hitting the Chinese by suggesting that they're not safe in their own country. So I had explained all of this, and he listened. But why do you think this is correct? I said, well, and I explained again who I was and what I had done and my vast knowledge. And at that time, that was probably about 25 years of knowledge in this particular field. About 23 years of knowledge in these fields that I had explained, and the work I'd done, and why we needed to spend such a vast amount of money, in my opinion, to keep safe the individuals that mattered in the United Kingdom, including him, when he would be there. So he then said, do you know what I'm going to do? And I said, right, I'm thinking he's going to tell me about the money. He said, I'm going to sack your commissioner. I said, excuse me? He said, I'm going to sack the commissioner of the metropolis. I said, so I understand what you're saying. You're going to sack the commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. He said, yeah, absolutely. He said, the Metropolitan Police is the largest police force in the United Kingdom by far. That's what he said to me. I said, obviously I'm aware of that. We are, like 50,000 people, and the next biggest police force would be like 10,000, if that, and most police forces are between 1,500 and 2,000, 2 to 3,000 people. So, yeah, we are by far the biggest, nigh on half of all the police in the country sit in the Met. So he says, well, I'm in charge of that. I said, yeah, I'm aware you're in charge of that politically. You are now the mayor. Used to be the Home Secretary. It's now you as the mayor. He said, yes, I'm in charge of that. He said, I said, but the commissioner obviously is in charge of that in terms of the policing is concerned, the day-to-day policing, which is why he sent me. He said, no, it's not about you. Because I thought what he was trying to say is that, why are you doing this? That's what I thought he was saying. He said, no, it's not about you. He said, it's about the commissioner. I think he's lackluster. I think he's terrible. I don't think he's done anything. And I am now, when I get back, I've made my mind up, I am going to sack him, and I will be the first person ever, he then repeated, he said, ever to sack a commissioner of police. And I'll just sack him outright. I said, but why are you telling me this, Mr. Mayor? He said, just so you know. I said, okay, great. I said, may I have my money? And he said, yes. That was it. I understood very, very clearly then what Boris Johnson was. And throughout the week he was there, a week and a half I think it was, he was there, it became clearer to me what he was. Because what he went out of his way to do was to make himself the centre of all the action. So you've got to imagine that when we sat down with the Chinese were very, very formal, and you'd sit across the table and you'd have the Union flag and you'd have the Chinese flag and you'd have the various officials sat aside, be they police, intelligence, whatever it might be. The political heads would be sat there. In our case, I'd always have generally the ambassador often with me in negotiations, the British ambassador, so we'll be sat there. And I'm trying to say, I need to build this, so can I do it, blah, blah, blah. Right, so when Boris came to that, he would want to be the centre of all the actions. And I was at one place that wasn't anything to do with building of the wall or anything. And he made several jokes. And the liaison guy whom I had with me from the Chinese, who was clearly a secret intelligence officer, albeit he was trying to say just a general, so either a special branch or a security service equivalent. Chinese have got a security service system as well as which has police powers, so it's like most in Europe. He was clearly there to keep an eye on me. But a great guy, I've got to say. He was there clearly to keep an eye on me. He said, and he was a senior fellow, he said, who is this man? I said, oh, he is the mayor. You've got your mayor, and the mayor of Beijing was there as well. He's the mayor, a very sombre-looking chap, bowing in the right positions, doing everything correct. And there was Boris. And he said, he actually said to me, I don't want to over-egg it, but it was something to the extent of, is he a joker? Because what he couldn't understand is how, in a diplomatic area, you could be telling irrelevant jokes to people of power. Right? This officer could not understand that. Why is this taking place? And he was trying to be polite when he was saying jokes, because I know he was looking for other words. Because if you know China, I was on the Chinese section in the branch, so we looked at China and looked at how China would affect the United Kingdom, in particular London, and affect how the Chinese community, or the community of Chinese heritage, is functioning in London, and look how communist infiltration was coming through, etc., etc. So I'd worked quite a lot on the Chinese section, so I understood how solemn and straight and direct and how correct you have to be when dealing with Chinese. And Boris was not at all. And it wasn't a breath of fresh air, my friends. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, he's great, Boris, he's a great laugh and all this. He's a breath of... No, it wasn't a breath of fresh air. It was, is this man a clown? And that's my own, I saw it with my own eyes and I heard it with my own eyes and I got it directly from that. And then subsequently, there's two police bodies in China. One is the People's Armed Police and the other is the General Police, who come out of Beijing. Now, the general police who come out of Beijing, and there's millions of them, they are unarmed as a general rule. The People's Armed Police are exactly what it says, they're armed, and they are Communist Party members, etc., etc. And don't generally do general police functioning, but do police functions for problematic or diplomatic or protective areas. So we had the deputy there of the People's Armed Police, and he had also, through an interpreter, he said, are we being serious? So this is the problem you had. People were not taking the Prime Minister, who he is now, that stage the Mayor, seriously. It was a problem. I have seen nothing since that to suggest that he was anything more or any more serious in any other role. So here we come now to the situation today. In fact, I should say one other thing before that. After I'd retired, I'd left the service, and it came to me by way of individuals that I used to run the Foreign Secretary's protection team. So the Mayor was made, as you know, he came into national politics. He attempted to obtain the role of Prime Minister. It was won by Theresa May, and I believe Theresa May, to get rid of him from the domestic scene, made him Foreign Secretary. Okay. So he was then Foreign Secretary for a while. Now, I used to run the previous Foreign Secretary's team on protection. Okay. And we used to travel globally all over the world, and it's a very difficult role because you're sending teams ahead, people ahead, you're going ahead yourself to work things out, you're going to some dangerous places, some less than dangerous places, but it's always extremely diplomatic. No matter where you go and what you do, it's extremely diplomatic because this is a Foreign Secretary representing your country, so it's always diplomatic. So when you speak with your police colleagues or security service colleagues from other countries to try and set up his protection, it's totally diplomatic, and it's set out in a very formal way. So when we used to have the previous on whom I looked after, he had that gravitas of being diplomatic. He had that with him. Okay, I've got to say that. I can't say anything else. He had that. So when you turned up, you'd done all your bits in sort of setting up the protection. I had my men in advance or my women in advance of the team, and we turn up. And we knew that the Foreign Secretary wasn't a problem. We just needed to protect him. He was not going to do something incorrect, something wrong, something that stood out of turn. He was going to do it absolutely as a Foreign Secretary should. Now, I believe there was a party in Rome. And the party, and what you've also got to understand is, as an ex-special branch officer, you're also looking at the potential for others to undermine that Foreign Secretary, to other states to utilise that, to be able to blackmail him, to be able to learn something about the United Kingdom that you can't learn from anybody else, to have control over an individual that's extremely powerful within the politics of the United Kingdom. So, when you're setting your systems up, you're looking for foreign intelligence officers who are going to try and take advantage of that principle that you've got. We call them the principal, the person we're looking after, in this case the Foreign Secretary. And so you're looking to make sure that that's also taken care of in your role. So that's why, the Foreign Secretary gets 24 hours, global, everywhere he goes, close protection. Right? From now, used to be Special Branch, now SO1 Specialist Protection. So there we were. And we make sure everything was honky-dory. I learned subsequently that there's a party in Rome being held in the mansion, castle indeed, of the son of a former KGB FSB officer who lives in London. And so I believe the Foreign Secretary was invited, and obviously the team are ready to take him out, send somebody in advance, etc., etc., and then they're told, stand down. I'm going myself. Now, it is highly, highly, highly abnormal. If I was running the team, I would want to know why, Foreign Secretary, you're telling me you want me to stand down. And I'd want to have it written by the PPS, the Principal Private Secretary, that he has said he does not want protection for this particular visit. One, because anything could happen to him in terms of him being killed, but two, because anything could happen to him in terms of falling foul of the system and opening themselves up to, as I've said before, the potential for intelligence operations used against that individual. Right? So I'd want that in writing, And then I'd say, okay, we're not forcing you to have any protection, but I want you to write, so I've got that written down. I'm not so sure that happened, but anyway, but the point is, stand down, protection, don't want you, I'm going to this myself. So the protection was left in London, and Boris went to this party. He was actually seen the day after in the airport in Rome by British people who, as we all know now, so I'm not telling you anything secret because it was put in the news, as we all know, was said to be as a lord. So you can put the first bit in front of it, as drunk as a lord, in the lounge waiting for his flight to come back to London. So, and then, obviously when he came back into London, the team were waiting for him and the team picked him up. And now I'm told by the public, not by the team, let's make this clear, that the team was close-lipped, so let's not say the team said anything. I'm told by hearing it from members of the public and the people at Heathrow that upon return, Foreign Secretary was still worse for wear. So you've got to take this again into the context of the previous Prime Minister of Italy fell foul of one of these congregations that had happened, and Berlusconi, that is, and lost his role because of these type of parties that had gone on. So, my advice would have been, and what you would say as head of the team, I would have said, this is very unwise. See what's happened to Mr. Berlusconi already. You don't want to put yourself in any threat by going there without any sort of protection. Indeed, maybe even by going there at all. But if you did without any sort of protection, so you can see what's going on. So anyway, it happened. And again, what this showed to me was a sense of a person not really taking into account how you can be damaged. In other words, doing one thing for himself, but assuming, because as you must understand, as Foreign Secretary, he is head of the Secret Intelligence Service, my old organisation, MI6, to general public understanding is MI6. He's the head of that politically. So and he gets the secret briefs from that. So you've got to see you're putting yourself at threat. So I would have said, be very, very careful. And I would speak regularly with, when I was running the Foreign Secretary team, I'd speak regularly with the Foreign Secretary and just explain where the dangers might be on any given operation. When we went to Moscow, example, this is where the dangers might be, and that Foreign Secretary took that on board, So this is what you've got to see. So I explain all of that, and maybe it's long-winded, but I wanted you to understand it fully, because now I believe we are at a very dangerous crossroad. I believe that Boris Johnson yesterday put in his resignation. British public need to understand that that resignation is not immediate. It is not effective immediately. And you need to understand that there is no such thing as caretaker Prime Minister. He has all the befugness and lapse into German there, all of the powers of a Prime Minister still sit with him. Right. Now, sit with me a second, because I'm going to jump sideways again. If you take a look at the person whom I think is the nearest to Boris Johnson, that would be Donald Trump. I think that what happened with Donald Trump and the Capitol building assault is what Boris Johnson potentially could create. And I'm not saying anybody's going to storm, the Houses of Parliament or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But with Donald Trump, had his Secret Service officers not prevented him or had just sat down and said, whatever you say, Mr. President, we're going to do it. For those of you who don't know, what happened is on the day when the Capitol building was stormed, Donald Trump ordered, he's the president, so it's a little bit different than the Prime Minister. As the president, you are in charge of all of the forces of the United States. Okay? Actually, in the United Kingdom, we do not swear allegiance to the government of the United Kingdom. We swear as police, as intelligence, as security officers, as military. We swear our allegiance to the Queen, okay, to the monarch. That's who our allegiance is sworn to, because that monarch represents the state. Okay, the government works to her, and they swear their allegiance to the state as well, or him, when it's a male. So, but in the United States, the bodies swear allegiance to the president, because the president is both the prime minister and the queen, as it is now, the monarch, in one. So they swear their allegiance to him. So it takes a very brave body to turn around and say, I'm not taking you there, Mr. President. He was saying, take me there, I want to lead my people. So you can imagine he would have turned up if there was a weak Secret Service, and he would have stood there, and then the crowd would have believed they had the authority from the monarch, if you will, in that sense, you want to look at it in that sense, and the Prime Minister in one, so the President, to do what they were doing. You see what I'm saying? They would have then felt, the President is saying we can storm that building because he's here and he is supporting our actions. Right? That's because he's a populist. Now, this is where I'm switching back again to the present Prime Minister. He is also a populist. He also has a very strong base. And there are people that if he turned around now and for the next 4 weeks give away this, did that, made things look better for the United Kingdom, even said, okay, let's send a regiment of soldiers openly into Ukraine to assist against fighting the Russians, next minute you're into a war. He could do all of that in the next several weeks. And once you're in a war, his chances of being thrown out of power are then zero. Right? So, depending on how much he wants to stay in power, he can do a whole host of things to keep himself in power. It is ultra dangerous. He can start saying, you know what? This is a coup d'etat against me. I am the Prime Minister. I am the leader of, and because people don't understand that system, he is the leader of the party, and the party choose the top person of that party to be their Prime Minister. The party can get rid of that person. When you vote in the United Kingdom, you do not vote for the Prime Minister. You actually vote for your local MP. And then the numbers of local MPs say which party has power and which party then chooses who's going to be the leader. Now, if you've already got a leader, it is a given that person, generally, that person who is the leader, if they get the largest number of MPs, will become the Prime Minister. But, you could argue it possibly doesn't even have to be that way, because you could have an election, and then, for whatever reason, the leader of the party could stand down. It wouldn't be anything against the election because you didn't vote for the leader of the party. You voted for your own MP in whatever constituency area you were. So that would not be illegal in the United Kingdom. Whereas in the United States, you actually vote for that person to be the president. And I think many of our people in the UK misunderstand that. So this man has not been voted for by 19 million people. No, you voted, all of you, for your constituency individual. Yes, many people would calculate within that, I like Boris Johnson, or I don't like whomever the other person might be who's standing against them. So I'll vote for the Conservatives because what I want is Boris Johnson in. But there are many places where that isn't the mathematics. There are many places where the mathematics is, I've always voted Labour, so I'll vote Labour regardless of who that person is. Or I've always voted Lib Dems, or I've always voted Conservatives. And whomever happens to be the leader will then stand as the leader. So you can get it all different ways. So what I'm saying is, he's utilising already the fact that X millions of people voted for me. That's what he's saying already. When effectively that is, in terms of constitution, not correct. The problem is that the media says that when it's not correct. We know Boris Johnson has lied, particularly about the Brexit situation, putting up all sorts of forecasts that were untrue. Even the most basic one of on the side of the bus, untrue, never held to account. We know that literally, as it was put by his then incumbent special advisor, tens of thousands of people have died unnecessarily in COVID. Yet still, you'll still find people turn around and say he did the best job on COVID. Because what we don't tend to do in the United Kingdom is actually benchmark these points. If you're going to say you did the best job in X, Y, and Z, who are you measuring that against? What's the measure to say somebody did a great job? Vaccination rates were very, very good in the beginning. Now they're on a par with the European Union. There is practically no difference in vaccination rates. In some countries, it's even higher. So what I'm saying is, and again, you'll hear people say, great job, nobody did it like us. That's not true. So there are a lot of untruths that go about, and Boris plays with untruths. He's been sacked twice from newspapers for writing untruths. I don't want to say, I'm speaking now like a politician, not saying lies. Untruths, I'm saying. So the situation is thus. If you leave Boris Johnson in power now, he can do a hell of a lot of damage with no responsibility. He can tweak situations so that in the end, after about 6 weeks, the public turn around and say, we want to keep Boris. We are not letting Boris go. And from my understanding going all the way back to 2008, Boris is about one-upmanship. That's what I got from the 2008 experience with him when I sat down with him in Beijing. I got that, so you think you're great putting some wall around this building, and you think you're great because you've done X, Y, and Z. Well, I'll tell you how great I am. I'm going to sack your commissioner. That's what I think Boris is about. And that's what frightens me right now. Because I think he will perceive that he has enemies all around him, and he's going to teach them that he, in the end, is a survivor. He is the one that will win. He is the one that will remain in power. If you notice his statement yesterday, he said all of the good things that he says he has done and never once referred to the fact that he was really resigning. Look at the statement. Look back at it. Now, I'm not saying that Boris Johnson isn't a great fella. I mean, that's his strength. He's a nice, jovial fella. When we're talking, we got him speaking jovially. And I know the protection team that protects him, my old colleagues, will think he's a nice fella. And I know that unlike practically any other prime minister, I can think maybe Margaret Thatcher, that he basically said yesterday, thank you very much to my prop team, even using the language, which means protection team, protection officers, even using the language of the officers, prop, which he's very, very good at. See, because he gets to the language of the people he's dealing with. So he said, thanks to my prop team who never leave. So effectively saying they are very, very loyal. That's what he's saying. And of course, when he leaves as Prime Minister, he will retain protection. So he will retain protection with the lads who will look after him. Quite rightly. There's nothing wrong about that at all. Quite right. Because as we've seen today, unfortunately, with ex-Prime Minister Abe in Japan, the threat is always there. And, I know the Japanese go relatively light on protection with their ex-PMs. And it can be problematic. And I haven't seen what's happened. I'm not calling a team down. But, the principal, as we call the protected individual, has lost his life. Yeah. And it's sent Japan into a shock. And that's in a country that actually shootings in any way, just even in criminality, are extremely, extremely rare. In fact, murders extremely rare, way, 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 way rarer than in the United Kingdom. With double the population. So this is going to be a shock for Japan. So I would not be saying Boris Johnson should not get protection. Of course he should. He's done whatever he did for the nation and therefore should retain his protection post his role. All I'm saying to you is he's got a fantastic knack, and that's his brilliance. And you've always got to see the positives and negatives in individuals. His brilliance is for the common man and woman, but generally it works better with men, I think. He speaks to them. Now, it can be crude. It can be as crude as, if you vote me in, I'll make sure there aren't all these immigrants coming through. Now, he says that in a dog whistle way, where you can understand what he's saying, but he doesn't say it out necessarily loud. But you understand that. So Brexit was, let's stop all these immigrants coming in. Now, that, he knew, played with a lot of people, particularly in the north and in various impoverished areas. It plays with them. It plays very, very well to them, right? let's stop all these immigrants coming in, taking our jobs, taking our school places, taking our hospital places, etc., etc., etc. He says it in a manner that doesn't put it so crudely, but everybody understands what's being said. The problem is that when you do the read over, and this is why I explained what I did in the past, I looked into the communities of the United Kingdom and wrote papers for senior levels of government, intelligence, security, police services, for the most senior levels. So I was used to delving into all data and all information. I knew that what he was saying was, in reality, we'll stop these brown, black-skinned people coming through because of the other things he added to it. Right? He added to it. Because that's the way the public read it. When you say immigration, they take all immigrants. Immigration, all immigrants. No, the European Union, having freedom of movement, were Europeans moving backwards and forwards. And by the way, us moving to 28 other European countries as we felt free to do so, as a right, because we were citizens of the European Union. And so I had an absolute right to live, work, go to school in Spain, Germany, France, Cyprus, Malta, you name it, Slovakia, Poland, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to mention all 28. So when we were doing that in the opposite direction, as many have, including Boris's family, living in France and living in Italy and in other places, including many politicians, including even Nigel Farage's people who have now German passports to go and be able to live in Germany and work in Spain or in Italy or wherever else they want to go as a European Union citizen. So they forget to tell you that angle. They told you the other angle. But what he didn't also say was, if you restrict European Union citizens entering the United Kingdom, because we need the labour, because our population is ageing and old, and because there are certain jobs that we've learnt now not to do, we will have to pick those people up from Asia and Africa to bring them to do the jobs, because we, the British, don't want to do those jobs. So now you've got fields upon fields upon fields in places that voted for Brexit, Lincolnshire, of artichokes or whatever else, yeah, going to naught, rotting in the fields because you can't get the people to pull the stuff out of the ground. And in the end, they're either going to have to extend the authorities of a work permit, which we now need also to work in Europe, we never did before. International driving licenses. We all know now about the fact that the cost of us transmitting our information to family via mobile phones has gone up in Europe because they're no longer a member, etc., etc., etc. Wherever we go in on holiday in the whole of Europe, that's going to be the case. Yeah, one or two companies say we won't do it, like BT, I think, is one of them. But most of them are going to do, and BT will soon follow. So the fact of the matter is that things have gone worse and we can't see where it's gone better. But the story still is, we prevented all these people coming here. No, you're going to bring other people here because we need them. So what I'm saying is, in the end, Boris is very good at being all things to all men and to some women. I think his appeal is to more men. I've got to say that when I look at him. And I think he speaks to speak of men. And I think he, as I said, he speaks to speak of the common man, but from the perspective of being educated, as they perceive it. So therefore, the common man saying, I love Boris, he's great, he's different, he says it as it is, and he's a clever guy. Big difference. And he's a clever guy. He's very bright. He went to Oxford, he was at Eton, he's a very bright guy. Yeah. So therefore, that's my vote. Because that then allows you to think, I'm not just voting for a clown. So a clown might say this, but he's educated. He can say it. And I know he knows what he's talking about. Now, you can question that, but this is what the situation is. So, in bringing to a close, I think that when we spoke last week with Andrew Lowney, and Andrew was of the perspective that we needed as a nation to have a much greater understanding of our politics and what we were and what we are, I can only reiterate that. I can only say that, frankly, the fact that we as a nation seem not to be politically astute, maybe, or even invigorated. We seem to be laissez-faire with politics. That we can be blinded and fooled by a guy who is, to all intents and purposes, if you would meet him, a nice fella. You know, when you'd meet him, he's a fella you'd like to have a drink in the pub with. And that strength, that capacity for him to do that, has won him elections in areas that Tories generally wouldn't, which is why members of the Tory party have found it very difficult, even though they know what's going on, to wish to get rid of him, because many of them feel they will lose their seats. And this is the problem with our system, isn't it? It's that in reality there isn't this presidential person constitutionally. However, in reality, optically, in reality of how it plays out on the ground, there is this presidential person. And I think that's the problem that the United Kingdom's got itself into now. How does it deal with a presidential person in a non-presidential system when the people that vote the people into power see a presidential person because they don't understand the system? It's really an anathema to how we function. And again, it is why he is still in power. And mark my words now as I speak to you, I will not be at all surprised if we perform actions in, say, the Ukraine that are clearly not sensible to perform, e.g. assisting the Ukrainians in a manner that is above and beyond providing weaponry. And even, to be fair, providing the weaponry as obviously marked us out for actions from the Russian state. Clearly, Russia's not going to attack us. We're miles away. It's not going to attack. But what it can do in the era of isometric warfare is there's nothing stopping the Russians, and I will say it to you now, I can see it happening all over the UK soon, is attacks via cyber on our industries, on maybe our health service, and basically just President Putin saying, gentlemen, fill your boots, do what you want against it. So it didn't need to be official. Do what you want against the United Kingdom. Teach them a lesson. So cyber activity. Of course, we will retaliate in the same way. But it all is something ratcheting up the system. It all moves towards a problem. Because it can be perceived that we're moving into a stance of open warfare. And if you've got a man in power who has been thrown out of power and wants to remain, from Margaret Thatcher, by the way, albeit she didn't incite people to carry out those actions. But what every historian can see is that that is what kept Margaret Thatcher in power. I would be in no way surprised that Boris doesn't try to attempt on that same angle, to up the ante, if you will, in the Ukraine. And to up the ante in many, many other ways in the United Kingdom itself by incorrectly, example, giving away higher levels of finances than should be given away in order to keep the country stable. So, yes, my argument is dead simple. I believe we are in a moment of extreme danger and that we need to work very, very quickly to release Boris Johnson from his role of Prime Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening this week. I hope you can stay with the argument that I'm putting forward, that it wasn't garbled or it wasn't too in-depth in some ways. I hope that you can understand my perspective on the issue, and I hope, as always, that you will listen in again next week.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening And don't forget to subscribe for free.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
More than a quarter of a century, I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.